Black poor girl cries, begging mom, get my wheelchair back. Until a billionaire sees and shouts, the memory hit him like a punch to the gut. Elena, his baby sister, 12 years old, and confined to a wheelchair after a car accident. Their father, drunk and bitter, screaming that she was useless, worthless, a waste of space and money. Elena's quiet tears as she tried to make herself smaller, invisible, less of a problem. Have you ever watched someone abuse the powerless and felt your blood boil? Have you ever seen cruelty disguised as discipline and wanted to scream? Hi viewers, welcome to American Stories That Matter, where we share real stories that remind us why love and humanity still exist in this broken world. If you've ever felt invisible, abandoned, or forgotten by the people who were supposed to protect you, this story will touch your heart and restore your faith. Drop a heart emoji in the comments if you believe one person can change everything. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button because these stories need to be told. Let's dive in together. The wheelchair hit the concrete with a sound that silenced an entire New York street until a billionaire's voice cut through the morning like thunder. December wind whipped through Harlem with the kind of cold that bites straight through your bones. Steam rose from manholes like ghosts while commuters hurried past, heads down, earbuds in, pretending not to see the drama unfolding on the sidewalk outside the 125th Street subway station. 16-year-old Keisha Williams sat crumpled on the icy pavement, her crutches scattered beside her like broken wings. Tears froze on her dark cheeks as she reached desperately toward the wheelchair her mother held just out of reach. "Mom, please," Keisha's voice cracked through chattering teeth. "Give me my chair back. I can't walk without it." Denise Williams stood over her daughter with eyes that held more exhaustion than love, more resentment than compassion. The wheelchair gleamed silver in the morning light, the one thing that gave Keisha independence, dignity, freedom. "You don't deserve this chair," Denise spat, her breath forming angry clouds. "All you do is sit in it feeling sorry for yourself. You're nothing but dead weight, girl. Nothing but a burden I've been carrying for 16 years. The crowd around them thickened, phones emerging like vultures sensing fresh tragedy. But everyone looked away from the girl on the ground. Everyone except the man watching from behind tinted windows of a sleek black Bentley. Marcus Sterling had built his empire by reading people, by spotting weakness and opportunity in equal measure. At 42, he owned half the real estate in Manhattan and had a reputation for crushing anyone who stood between him and profit. His suits cost more than most people's cars. His handshake could make or break careers. But sitting in that leather seat, watching a mother torment her disabled daughter, something ancient and buried stirred in his chest. The memory hit him like a punch to the gut. Elena, his baby sister, 12 years old and confined to a wheelchair after a car accident. Their father, drunk and bitter, screaming that she was useless, worthless, a waste of space and money. Elena's quiet tears as she tried to make herself smaller, invisible, less of a problem. Marcus had been 17 then, powerless to protect her. 3 months later, Elena was dead, officially from complications, but really from a broken heart and a father who saw her disability as shame rather than strength. 25 years had passed, but the guilt still lived in his bones. The Bentley door slammed open with a force that made heads turn. "Stop!" Marcus's voice boomed across the street with the authority of a man accustomed to being obeyed. "Give that wheelchair back right now." Denise's head snapped up, her eyes widening as she took in the expensive suit, the confident stride, the kind of presence that commanded respect whether you wanted to give it or not. "Mind your own business," she snarled, but her voice wavered. "This is between me and my daughter." Marcus stepped closer, his 6-foot frame casting a shadow over both women. Up close, Keisha could see the storm brewing in his gray eyes, the way his jaw tightened with barely controlled rage. "Your daughter is sitting on frozen concrete in December while you wave her mobility device around like a toy," he said, his voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than shouting. "That makes it my business. Have you ever watched someone abuse the powerless and felt your blood boil? Have you ever seen cruelty disguised as discipline and wanted to scream? If you've ever felt invisible until someone finally saw your pain, this story will shatter your heart and rebuild it. Drop a heart emoji if you believe one person can change everything. Denise clutched the wheelchair tighter, her knuckles white against the metal. Who do you think you are? I'm someone with enough money to make your life very comfortable, Marcus said quietly, or very difficult. Your choice. The crowd pressed closer, sensing drama better than reality TV. Phones recorded every word, every gesture, already uploading to social media with hashtags about disability rights and public confrontations. Keisha stared up at this stranger who'd appeared like something out of a movie. She learned not to expect rescue, not to hope for heroes. But there was something in his eyes when he looked at her. Not pity, not disgust, but recognition. Like he saw something in her that even she didn't know existed. Please, she whispered, her voice barely audible above the city noise. I just want to go home. When Marcus Sterling stepped out of that limousine, Denise Williams had no idea she was facing a man who'd spent 20 years hunting for a chance at redemption. Her next words would cost her more than just a wheelchair. She thought she was dealing with just another rich man with a guilty conscience, until he spoke her daughter's medical history like he'd memorized her file. The leather interior of his Bentley gleamed like polished obsidian as Marcus spread legal documents across the seat. Outside, Harlem moved at its usual frantic pace, but inside this car, time slowed to the rhythm of 3 heartbeats and a decision that would rewrite their futures. Marcus had made the call during the 5-minute drive from the subway station to his lawyer's office. By the time they pulled up to the curb, he had Keisha's entire medical history, school records, and social services reports downloaded to his phone. Keisha Marie Williams, he said, his voice steady as he scrolled through the information. Born February 14th, 2008. Cerebral palsy, mild to moderate. Physical therapy discontinued at age 12 due to insurance issues. Keisha's eyes widened from where she sat in her reclaimed wheelchair. How do you know all that? IEP meetings missed, 14 in the last 2 years. Emergency room visits, 6 in the past 12 months for malnutrition-related complications. Social services visits, 3 complaints filed by neighbors, all marked unfounded due to lack of evidence. Denise shifted uncomfortably in the passenger seat, her earlier bravado cracking like ice under pressure. You can't just look up people's private information. I can when I'm considering a significant investment, Marcus replied, turning to face her fully. $50,000. Cash. Today. The silence that followed was deafening. 50,000 for what? Denise's voice came out as a whisper. Marcus leaned back against the leather seat, his expression unreadable. Custody of your daughter. Temporary guardianship while she receives proper medical care, education, and rehabilitation. You sign the papers, I write the check, and Keisha gets the life she deserves. You want to buy my daughter? Denise's voice cracked with something between outrage and hunger. I want to save her, Marcus said quietly. From a mother who just called her dead weight in front of strangers. Keisha felt her world tilt sideways. People didn't just offer to change your entire life in the back seat of expensive cars. Things like this didn't happen to girls like her. And what do you get out of it? Denise asked, suspicion creeping into her voice. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, his eyes focused on something beyond the tinted windows. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old ghosts and older regrets. I had a sister once. She had a condition similar to Keisha's. I was too young then, too powerless to help her when she needed it most. He turned to look directly at Keisha. I'm not powerless anymore. The car fell silent except for the distant hum of city traffic. Keisha studied this man who'd appeared out of nowhere with an offer that sounded too good to be true. His hands were steady as he held the legal documents, but she caught the slight tremor in his voice when he mentioned his sister. What happened to her? Keisha asked softly. She died, Marcus said simply, because no one fought hard enough to save her. Have you ever met someone who saw your worth before you did? When someone believed in your potential, when everyone else saw only problems. Share your story below. Denise stared at the papers in Marcus's hands like they were written in a foreign language. $52,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life. Enough to pay off debts, start over, maybe even get clean for real this time. But it meant giving up Keisha, admitting that she'd failed as a mother, acknowledging that her daughter would be better off with a stranger than with the woman who'd carried her for 9 months. "How do I know you're not some kind of predator?" Denise asked, grasping for reasons to refuse what her heart already knew was the right choice. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed her his business profile, his foundation work, his spotless background check that he'd had prepared within the hour. "You don't have to trust me," he said. "But look at your daughter. Really look at her. She's 16 years old and weighs 93 pounds. Her medical records show chronic malnutrition. Her school attendance is sporadic at best. Yesterday, she had to beg strangers for help getting her wheelchair back from her own mother." Each word hit like a physical blow. Denise felt the weight of 16 years of barely getting by, of choosing her own needs over her daughter's, of loving someone but failing them completely. "I'm not a bad person," she whispered. "No," Marcus agreed. "You're a tired person, an overwhelmed person, a person who's been carrying a responsibility that requires resources you don't have. But that doesn't change what Keisha needs." He placed a pen on top of the custody papers and slid them toward Denise. "You want to sell your daughter for $50,000. Marcus's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more threat than shouting. "Lady, I'm not buying her. I'm buying her freedom from you." As Denise signed the temporary custody papers with shaking hands, Marcus leaned close enough for only Keisha to hear. "I had a sister like you once. I couldn't save her, but I can save you." She didn't know yet that saving her would mean losing the only family she'd ever known, or that she was about to gain something far more dangerous: hope. She'd never seen wealth like this, where even the doorknobs cost more than her mother's rent, and every surface reflected back a girl who didn't belong. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed Manhattan spread below like a circuit board, lights twinkling in patterns that seemed to pulse with the city's heartbeat. Keisha pressed her palm against the glass, leaving a small print on the perfect surface, the first mark she'd ever made on something truly beautiful. Marcus Sterling's penthouse occupied the entire top floor of a Fifth Avenue building that looked like something from a movie. The elevator ride alone took longer than most conversations Keisha had ever had with her mother. When the doors opened directly into his living room, she felt like Alice falling through the looking glass into a world where everything was possible and nothing made sense. "Welcome home," Marcus said, his voice softer than it had been in the car. Home. The word felt foreign on her tongue. Home had always been cramped apartments with broken heaters, secondhand furniture held together with duct tape, and the constant worry about next month's rent. This place existed in an entirely different universe. The floors were made of marble that reflected everything like still water. The furniture looked like it belonged to museums, all clean lines and expensive fabrics in shades of cream and gold. Art covered the walls, pieces that probably cost more than most people made in a year. "This is Maria," Marcus said as an older Latina woman approached with a warm smile. "She runs everything around here." "Maria, this is Keisha." Maria Gonzalez had worked for wealthy families for 20 years, but something about this girl touched her immediately. Maybe it was the way Keisha tried to make herself smaller in the wheelchair, or how her eyes went wide with wonder at simple luxuries most people took for granted. "Mija, you look cold," Maria said, her accent soft and musical. "Let me show you to your room, get you settled in." "Your room. Not the guest room, not the spare room, but hers." Keisha followed Maria down a hallway lined with more art than she'd ever seen outside of school textbooks. The bedroom was bigger than her entire apartment had been. A king-size bed dominated the center, covered in what looked like clouds made of fabric. The bathroom had a tub large enough to swim in and towels so thick they felt like blankets. "The closet is empty for now," Maria explained, "but Mr. Sterling said we'll go shopping tomorrow. Get you some clothes that fit properly." Keisha caught sight of herself in the floor-length mirror and flinched. Her jeans had holes that weren't fashionable, Her shirt was 3 sizes too big, and her sneakers were held together with superglue and prayer. She looked like exactly what she was, a charity case. "I don't know how long I'm staying," she said quietly. "Maybe we shouldn't spend money on clothes." Maria's expression softened. "Mija, you're not visiting. You live here now." That evening, Marcus knocked on her door frame. The door itself stood open because closing it felt too presumptuous, too permanent. "How are you settling in?" he asked. Keisha gestured around the room that was larger than any space she'd ever called her own. "It's beautiful. I mean, everything is beautiful. I don't understand why you're doing this." Marcus leaned against the door frame, studying her face. In the soft lighting of the bedroom, she looked younger than 16, but also older somehow, like someone who'd been forced to grow up too fast in all the wrong ways. "Have you eaten dinner?" he asked instead of answering her question. "I had some crackers from the kitchen." Maria left them out. "Crackers aren't dinner. Come on." The dining room table could have seated 12 people, but Marcus had Maria's set places at one end, so they wouldn't feel lost in the space. Crystal glasses caught the light from the chandelier overhead, and silverware gleamed like jewelry. Keisha stared at the array of forks and knives beside her plate. "I don't know which ones to use. Start from the outside and work your way in," Marcus said gently. "But honestly, it doesn't matter. It's just food. Just food." But it wasn't really. It was the first time anyone had ever served her a meal on actual china, with actual silverware, and an actual table instead of eating, standing up in the kitchen, or balanced on the couch watching TV. "What's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen that you thought you could never have? Tell me about a moment when luxury felt like a dream." "Why me?" Keisha asked as they ate. "There are thousands of kids in worse situations. Kids who are actually homeless, actually starving. Why did you pick me?" Marcus set down his fork and looked at her directly. "Because I saw something in you that reminded me of my sister. Not just the disability, though that was part of it. It was the way you kept your dignity even when your mother was trying to take it away. The way you asked for help without begging. The way you looked at that wheelchair, not like it was a limitation, but like it was your freedom." "Your sister," Keisha said carefully. "What was her name?" "Elena." Elena rose sterling. His voice grew quiet. "She would have been 37 this year." "What happened to her?" Marcus was silent for so long that Keisha thought he wouldn't answer. When he finally spoke, his words came slowly, like they hurt to say. "Our father saw her disability as a reflection of his own failure. He became cruel, neglectful. I tried to protect her, but I was just a kid myself. She got sick, pneumonia, and he refused to take her to the hospital. Said she wasn't worth the medical bills." The silence that followed was heavy with old pain and regret. By the time I convinced him to seek treatment, it was too late. She died 3 days later, holding my hand and apologizing for being too much trouble. Keisha felt tears burning behind her eyes. "I'm sorry. I swore that day that if I ever had the power to save someone like her, I would, no matter what it cost, no matter what anyone thought about my motives." He looked directly at her. "Today I had that power. That first night, as Keisha lay in Egyptian cotton sheets worth more than her mother's monthly paycheck, she heard something that made her blood freeze. Marcus on the phone in his study, voice hard as steel, saying find everything on Denise Williams. Every debt, every secret, every mistake. I want her neutralized permanently." She thought he was her savior until she heard him planning her mother's destruction, and realized even angels can have the devil's methods. His study smelled of leather and expensive whiskey, walls lined with law books and business awards. But sitting across from him in her borrowed pajamas, Keisha felt like she was negotiating with a king who held both their fates in his manicured hands. "You want to have my mother investigated," Keisha said. It wasn't a question. Marcus didn't deny it. He sat behind his massive desk, fingers steepled, looking every inch the billionaire who'd built an empire by staying 10 steps ahead of everyone else. "I want to ensure you're never returned to an unsafe environment," he said carefully. "By destroying her. By documenting the truth." His voice remained steady, but Keisha caught the flash of something dangerous in his eyes. "Your mother has a history, Keisha. Drug arrests, welfare fraud, child endangerment complaints. The custody agreement we signed is temporary. If she decides she wants you back, she won't. The words came out bitter and certain. She took $50,000 to get rid of me. She's probably halfway to Atlantic City by now. Marcus leaned forward, his expression softening slightly. Even if that's true, there are other family members who might surface. Relatives looking for a payday. Social workers who might question the arrangement. I need ammunition to protect you. The word ammunition hung in the air between them like smoke from a fired gun. Keisha understood now that Marcus Sterling didn't just rescue people. He calculated, strategized, eliminated threats with the same cold precision he used in business deals. What if she's really trying to change? Keisha asked quietly. What if the money gives her a chance to get clean, start over? Do you believe that? The question hit like a physical blow because the answer was so clear, so painful. No. Then why are you defending her? Keisha looked around the study with its perfect organization and expensive everything. Because she's still my mother. Because maybe she didn't know how to love me the right way, but she kept me when other people would have given up. Because destroying her feels like destroying the only life I ever knew. Marcus stood and moved around the desk, his movements predatory and protective at the same time. When he spoke, his voice carried the weight of old wounds and older wisdom. Your mother called you dead weight in front of strangers. She took away the one thing that gave you mobility and independence. She denied you medical care, educational support, and basic nutrition. He paused in front of her wheelchair. Which one of those things sounds like love to you? Is it wrong to use power to protect someone if your methods aren't perfect? When does justice become revenge? Share your thoughts. The silence stretched between them, filled with uncomfortable truths and competing loyalties. Keisha had spent 16 years making excuses for her mother's failures, finding reasons to be grateful for the bare minimum of care. You think I'm the villain in your story? Marcus asked, his voice dropping to that dangerous whisper she'd heard him use with Denise. Your mother left you on a street corner in December. I brought you home. Which one of us loves you, Keisha? The word love stopped her cold. Love wasn't something she associated with Marcus Sterling. Gratitude, yes. Protection, definitely. But love implied something deeper, more complicated than a business transaction disguised as charity. You don't love me, she said carefully. You feel guilty about your sister. Marcus was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was seeing her for the first time. When he finally spoke, his honesty surprised them both. Maybe it started that way. But guilt doesn't make you learn someone's favorite foods or notice when they're having a bad day. Guilt doesn't make you proud when they accomplish something new. He paused. You're right that I'm trying to save Elena through you. But that doesn't make my feelings for you any less real. The admission hung between them, changing something fundamental in the air. Keisha felt a flutter in her chest that had nothing to do with gratitude and everything to do with the way he looked at her. Not as a project or a second chance, but as herself. What kind of feelings? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Marcus could answer, Maria burst through the study doors with tears in her eyes and a manila folder clutched against her chest. Mr. Sterling, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's something about the girl's medical records you need to see immediately. Something the doctors missed. She dropped the folder on his desk with shaking hands. The papers inside scattered across the polished wood surface, revealing lab results, growth charts, and diagnostic reports that painted a picture more disturbing than either of them had imagined. Dios mío, Maria whispered, pointing to a specific test result. Look at the nutrition panels from her first day here versus her historical records. This isn't just neglect. Marcus picked up the papers, his expression growing darker with each page. These levels, this kind of systematic deficiency, doesn't happen by accident. Just as Keisha was beginning to trust his motives, Maria burst into the study with tears in her eyes. Mr. Sterling, there's something about the girl's medical records you need to see. Something the doctors missed. The folder she dropped on his desk contained test results that would change everything they thought they knew about Keisha's condition. The doctors had been wrong for 16 years. She wasn't permanently disabled. She was being slowly poisoned by the person who should have protected her most. The medical files scattered across the mahogany desk like evidence in a murder trial. Each lab result, each stunted growth marker, each nutritional deficiency painted a picture of deliberate sabotage disguised as motherly concern. Dr. Sarah Chun had been reviewing Keisha's case files when the pattern became impossible to ignore. Now, she sat across from Marcus and Keisha in the penthouse living room, her expression grim as she spread out the damning evidence. The levels of malnutrition in your historical records are severe enough to impact muscle development, bone density, and neurological function, Dr. Chen explained, her voice clinical but compassionate. But what's remarkable is how quickly your body has responded to proper nutrition in just 3 weeks. Keisha stared at the charts, showing her dramatic improvement since moving in with Marcus. Weight gain, increased muscle tone, improved coordination. Changes that should have taken months were happening in weeks. I don't understand, Keisha whispered. Are you saying my condition isn't as bad as we thought? Dr. Chen chose her words carefully. Cerebral palsy doesn't disappear, but the severity of your symptoms has been dramatically worsened by chronic malnutrition. Someone has been systematically depriving you of the nutrients necessary for proper development. The room fell silent except for the distant hum of Manhattan traffic far below. Someone? Marcus's voice was dangerously quiet. You mean her mother? The pattern suggests deliberate restriction of calories, protein, and essential vitamins over many years. This wasn't poverty or ignorance. This was calculated. Keisha felt the world tilt sideways. But why would my mother want to keep me sick? Dr. Chun exchanged glances with Marcus before continuing. Disability benefits are based on the severity of condition. A child who shows significant improvement might lose funding. Some caregivers. She paused, searching for diplomatic words. Some caregivers have been known to maintain a child's dependency for financial reasons. The words hit Keisha like physical blows. Her mother hadn't just neglected her. She'd actively sabotaged her health to maintain government benefits. Every missed meal, every refused supplement, every we can't afford it, had been a lie designed to keep her weak and dependent. You mean, I could have been stronger? Keisha's voice barely rose above a whisper. I could have walked better if she'd just fed me properly? The silence that followed was louder than screaming. Marcus stood abruptly, his hands clenched into fists. The careful control he'd maintained since bringing her home cracked, revealing the rage burning underneath. She poisoned you, he said, his voice rough with fury. For 16 years, she systematically poisoned her own daughter to keep the disability checks coming. What have you ever discovered that someone you trusted was holding you back on purpose? How do you forgive that level of betrayal? Tell me your experience. Dr. Chun continued with professional detachment, but Keisha could see the anger in her eyes too. With proper nutrition, physical therapy, and medical support, we should see continued improvement. You'll never be completely free of cerebral palsy, but the life you've been living isn't the life you have to keep living. How much better could I get? Keisha asked. Potentially significant improvement in mobility, strength, and independence. With intensive rehabilitation. Dr. Chen paused, consulting her notes. I believe you could transition from wheelchair dependence to walking with assistive devices for longer distances. Hope bloomed in Keisha's chest like a flower reaching towards sunlight. For the first time in her life, improvement wasn't just possible, it was probable. But with hope came rage. 16 years of limitations that didn't have to exist. 16 years of being told she was lucky to survive, grateful to have care, accepting the minimum as if it were a gift. She stole my life, Keisha whispered. She stole 16 years, Marcus corrected, moving to kneel beside her wheelchair. But you have 60 or 70 more to take back. His hands covered hers, warm and steady and sure. Looking into his eyes, Keisha saw not pity but determination. Not charity, but partnership. What happens now, she asked. Now we build you the life you should have had all along, Marcus said. Starting tomorrow, you begin intensive rehabilitation. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, nutrition counseling. We're going to discover exactly how strong you can become. And my mother? Marcus's expression hardened. Your mother will never have the opportunity to hurt you again. I'll make sure of that. The promise in his voice carried the weight of unlimited resources and unshakable determination. But it also carried something else, a protectiveness that felt more personal than professional, more intimate than charitable. As Dr. Chun gathered her files and prepared to leave, she turned back with one final observation. The improvement we're seeing isn't just physical, Keisha. Your cognitive function, your emotional responses, your overall vitality. Everything is enhanced when your body gets what it needs to thrive. You're not just getting stronger. You're becoming who you were always meant to be. As Dr. Chun explained the intensive therapy needed to reverse years of damage, Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Clear my calendar for the next 6 months. I'm personally overseeing every aspect of her recovery. He didn't realize yet that healing her body would mean confronting his own broken heart. Physical therapy became emotional archaeology. Every strengthened muscle uncovered another layer of the woman she was meant to be. The rehabilitation center hummed with determination and hope. Parallel bars stretched like silver highways toward independence. And with each wobbling step, Keisha claimed another piece of the life that had been stolen from her. 3 months into treatment, her transformation was nothing short of miraculous. The girl who'd been abandoned on a frozen street corner now stood upright for 20 minutes at a time. Her arms, once weak from malnutrition, could now lift her entire body weight during transfers. Marcus never missed an appointment. While other patients had rotating caregivers or came alone, Keisha always had him in the corner of the therapy room, watching every exercise, celebrating every milestone, offering quiet encouragement when frustration threatened to overwhelm her progress. Ready for the walking test? Dr. Chun asked, clipboard in hand. Keisha positioned herself at the parallel bars, Marcus moving to stand at the far end like a finish line she desperately wanted to reach. Her legs trembled, not from weakness anymore, but from anticipation. 1 step, 2 steps, 3. The physical therapist had seen remarkable recoveries before, but watching Keisha move forward with increasing confidence felt different. This wasn't just muscle memory returning. This was a soul reclaiming its body. Keep going, Marcus called out, his voice thick with emotion. You've got this. Step 4, 5, 6. Her legs wobbled, and for a terrifying moment, she thought she'd fall. But Marcus was already moving, his hands reaching out to catch her before she even began to stumble. The moment their eyes met, something electric passed between them. Recognition, pride, and something deeper that neither was ready to name. 10 steps, Dr. Chin announced, her voice filled with professional amazement. Keisha, 3 months ago you couldn't stand unassisted for 30 seconds. Today you just walked 10 steps without your wheelchair. The therapy room erupted in applause from staff and other patients, but Keisha only heard Marcus's voice saying her name like a prayer answered. I'm so proud of you, he whispered, his hands still steadying her arms. The touch lingered longer than necessary, his thumbs brushing against her skin in a way that made her heart race. She was becoming aware of him differently now, not as a guardian or protector, but as a man whose presence made her feel safe and alive and strangely breathless. What's the most powerful moment when someone believed in your potential? When did encouragement change your life? Share that memory. During the drive home, Keisha studied Marcus's profile as he navigated Manhattan traffic. Somewhere between the rescue and the rehabilitation, she'd stopped seeing him as her savior and started noticing the way his jaw tightened when he concentrated, how his hands looked strong and capable on the steering wheel, the fact that he smelled like expensive cologne and something uniquely him. You don't have to come to every appointment, she said quietly. I know you're busy with work. There's nowhere else I'd rather be, he replied without hesitation. Why? Marcus was quiet for several blocks, his hands gripping the steering wheel tighter. Because watching you get stronger makes me feel like I'm finally doing something right. The honesty in his voice made her chest tight. You've done everything right. Have I? He glanced at her quickly before focusing back on the road. Sometimes I wonder if I'm helping you heal or just using your recovery to fix something broken in myself. Does it matter? Keisha asked. If we're both getting what we need? The question hung between them, loaded with implications neither was ready to explore fully. But as they pulled into the underground garage of his building, Keisha realized that her feelings for Marcus had evolved far beyond gratitude. That evening, as they reviewed her therapy progress over dinner, Marcus's phone rang with a call that made his expression darken. Sterling, he answered curtly. Keisha watched his face change as he listened to whoever was on the other end. His jaw tightened, his eyes grew cold, and when he finally spoke, his voice carried the deadly calm that meant someone was about to have a very bad day. You're certain? He asked. The custody arrangement was temporary. She's getting stronger now, more independent. Maybe it's time to discuss her options. Standing in the hallway on legs that finally held her steady, Keisha realized her greatest fear wasn't being abandoned again. It was losing the man who'd taught her what safety felt like. After 3 months of progress, Keisha overheard Marcus talking to his lawyer. The custody arrangement was temporary. She's getting stronger now, more independent. Maybe it's time to discuss her options. Standing in the hallway on legs that finally held her steady, she realized her greatest fear wasn't being abandoned again. It was losing the man who'd taught her what safety felt like. She was supposed to be grateful, not infatuated, but nobody prepared her heart for the difference between a guardian and a man. Her birthday cake glowed with 17 candles in the dining room, where crystal chandelier light danced across her face. She'd grown beautiful in ways that had nothing to do with recovery. Confident, sharp, alive with possibility. Marcus had planned the celebration carefully. Just the 3 of them, himself, Keisha, and Maria, because large crowds still overwhelmed her, and strangers meant questions about their arrangement that neither was ready to answer publicly. Make a wish, Maria encouraged, her smile warm with genuine affection for the girl who transformed their quiet household into something resembling a family. Keisha closed her eyes, 17 candles flickering in the reflection of her dark pupils. When she opened them and leaned forward to blow out the flames, Marcus found himself holding his breath. She'd changed so much in the past year. Her face had filled out with proper nutrition, losing the hollow angles of starvation. Her shoulders sat straighter, her movements more confident. But it was her eyes that held him, intelligent, determined, and increasingly aware of him in ways that made his chest tight with something between pride and panic. What did you wish for? He asked as she successfully extinguished all the candles in one breath. If I tell you, it won't come true, she said, but her gaze lingered on his face in a way that made the answer clear. Later, after Maria had retired to her room, and they sat in the living room with the city lights twinkling beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, Keisha finally found the courage to voice what had been building between them for months. I heard you on the phone with your lawyer yesterday, she said quietly. Marcus set down his coffee cup, his expression carefully neutral. Which conversation? About my options. About the temporary custody arrangement. She took a breath that seemed to require all her courage. Are you planning to send me away? Not send you away, Marcus said carefully. But you're 17 now, Keisha. You're getting stronger, more independent. You have choices you didn't have before. What if I don't want choices? The words came out more forcefully than she'd intended. What if I want to stay here with you? The silence that followed was charged with everything they hadn't said, everything they'd been dancing around for months. Marcus stood abruptly, moving to the windows as if the city below held answers to questions he didn't want to ask. You don't know what you want, he said, his voice strained. You're grateful, and you're confusing gratitude with. Don't tell me what I'm feeling. Keisha's voice carried a strength that surprised them both. I'm not that broken girl you found anymore. When are you going to stop seeing me as a charity case and start seeing me as me? Marcus turned from the window, his eyes finding hers across the room. I see you, Keisha. That's the problem. Have you ever felt invisible to someone you cared about? When did you realize you'd outgrown how someone saw you? Tell me about that moment of recognition. Then why are you trying to get rid of me? Because what I'm thinking about you isn't appropriate for a guardian to think about his ward. The admission hung between them like a confession, raw and honest and dangerous. Keisha felt her heart race, not with fear, but with something fiercer: recognition, validation, hope. "I'm not your ward anymore," she said, moving her wheelchair closer to where he stood. "I'm not your responsibility or your charity case. I'm just me, and I choose you." Marcus's control, so carefully maintained for 17 years, cracked at her words. He was across the room in 3 steps, kneeling beside her chair, his hands framing her face like she was something precious he was afraid to break. "You don't understand what you're saying," he whispered. "I understand that you saved my life. I understand that you see me as strong when everyone else saw me as broken. I understand that when you look at me, I feel beautiful for the first time in my life. Keisha, I understand that I love you," she said simply. "Not as a guardian or a savior, but as the man who taught me I was worth saving." The words broke something inside him. Marcus leaned forward, his forehead touching hers, breathing her in like she was air and he'd been drowning. "This is complicated," he whispered. "Everything worth having is complicated." When he kissed her, it was tentative at first, a question rather than a statement. But when she kissed him back with all the certainty she'd been carrying for months, something ignited between them that felt both inevitable and impossible. The kiss deepened, 17 years of careful boundaries dissolving in the space between heartbeats. Her hands tangled in his hair, pulling him closer, and he responded with a hunger that had been building since the day he'd watched her take her first steps toward independence. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "This changes everything," he said. "Good," Keisha replied. Everything needed changing. Just as the tension between them reached breaking point, the doorbell rang. Through the intercom came a voice that made Keisha's blood turn to ice. "This is Denise Williams. I want my daughter back, and I'm not leaving without her." Their first night together as adults was interrupted by breaking news on every channel. Billionaire's ward turns 18. Inappropriate relationship or true love. But the real shock came in the morning when Marcus found a letter slipped under the door that made him question everything he thought he knew about saving Keisha. Hell has many faces, but the cruelest one wears the mask of a mother who returns only when her child becomes valuable. The penthouse's serene atmosphere shattered like expensive crystal as Denise's voice echoed through rooms that had become a sanctuary. Suddenly, the marble floors felt cold again, the high ceilings oppressive rather than grand. "Open this door, Marcus Sterling." Denise's voice carried through the intercom with the desperation of someone who'd burned through $50,000 faster than expected. "I know my daughter is in there." Marcus moved to the security panel, his face grim as he studied the video feed. Denise stood in the lobby flanked by 2 men in cheap suits. Lawyers, probably, though they looked more like debt collectors. "She brought backup," Marcus muttered, his protective instincts kicking into high gear. Keisha rolled her wheelchair to the window, looking down at the street where news vans were already gathering. Someone had tipped off the media. This wasn't just a custody dispute. It was a public relations nightmare in the making. "I have to face her," Keisha said quietly. "No, you don't. The custody agreement is legal. She signed it." "Temporary custody," Keisha reminded him. "I'm 17 now. Legally, I can make my own choices, but she's still my mother until I turn 18. The intercom crackled again. "Mr. Sterling, this is Attorney James Morrison representing Ms. Williams. We have legal grounds to contest the custody arrangement and remove the minor from your care immediately." Marcus pressed the button with more force than necessary. Ms. Williams relinquished custody voluntarily in exchange for financial compensation. "That agreement stands." "Circumstances have changed," came the reply. "Ms. Williams was under duress during the original signing, and new information has come to light regarding the nature of your relationship with her daughter." The implication hit like a physical blow. Somehow, they knew about last night's kiss, about the growing feelings between Marcus and Keisha. In the age of smartphones and social media, privacy was a luxury even billionaires couldn't always afford. "Let them up," Keisha said, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. Keisha, this was always going to happen eventually. Better to face it now, on our terms, than have them drag us through the courts. 5 minutes later, Denise Williams stood in Marcus's living room looking like a woman who'd been through hell and blamed everyone else for the trip. The $50,000 had clearly been spent on more than just getting clean. Her clothes were new but cheap, her makeup too heavy, her smile too bright. "My baby," she said, arms outstretched toward Keisha. "Look how beautiful you've become." Keisha didn't move from her wheelchair. "Hello, mother." The distance in those two words could have spanned continents. Denise's face faltered for just a moment before the performance resumed. "I've been getting help," Denise continued. "Rehab, therapy, job training. I'm ready to be the mother you deserve now." "A year too late," Marcus said coldly. Attorney Morrison stepped forward, briefcase clicking open with the sound of impending trouble. "Mr. Sterling, my client has evidence that your relationship with her daughter has crossed appropriate boundaries. Photos, witness statements, documentation of an inappropriate romantic relationship between a guardian and his ward. When someone who hurt you returns claiming they've changed, how do you decide whether to forgive? Share your experience with toxic people coming back." Marcus felt his world tilting sideways. Someone had been watching them, documenting their growing closeness, waiting for the perfect moment to weaponize their feelings against them. "You want to destroy him?" Keisha's voice cut through the tension like a blade. "Try. But you'll have to go through me first." She rolled her wheelchair forward, positioning herself between Marcus and her mother with a courage that took everyone's breath away. "You think money makes you her father?" Denise spat, her mask slipping to reveal the bitterness underneath. "I carried her for 9 months. I raised her for 16 years. You poisoned her for 16 years, Marcus replied quietly, his voice carrying the weight of medical evidence and unshakable conviction. "I gave her life. You took advantage of a vulnerable child. I saved her from the woman who was slowly killing her for disability checks." The accusation hit the room like a bomb. Morrison's confident expression faltered as he realized his client had failed to mention the systematic neglect and possible medical abuse that had necessitated the rescue in the first place. "That's a lie," Denise whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. "Medical records don't lie," Marcus said. "Neither do nutrition panels, growth charts, or documented improvement since she's been in my care." Keisha had heard enough. "Everyone stop talking about me like I'm not here." The room fell silent, all eyes turning to the young woman who'd found her voice in the space between gratitude and love, between rescue and choice. "Mother, you didn't come back because you missed me, or because you got clean, or because you want to be a better parent. You came back because you heard about the foundation Marcus is starting in my name. You came back because you smell money." "That's not true, baby. Don't call me baby. You lost that right when you took my wheelchair away in December and called me dead weight in front of strangers." The silence that followed was deafening. "I choose to stay here," Keisha continued, her voice growing stronger with each word. "I choose the man who saw my worth before I knew it existed. I choose the life where I'm growing stronger instead of being kept weak. I choose love over obligation, hope over history." As Denise played her final card, threatening to expose Marcus's inappropriate relationship with a minor, Keisha stepped forward with strength that surprised everyone. "You want to destroy him? Try, but you'll have to go through me first." She didn't know yet that her loyalty would cost them both everything they'd built together. The courtroom became their battlefield, but the real war was fought in the spaces between truth and perception, love and impropriety. The courthouse steps swarmed with reporters like hungry vultures circling fresh tragedy. Inside, marble columns stood as silent witnesses to a battle that would determine not just custody, but the very definition of family and love. Judge Patricia Hendricks had seen every kind of custody dispute in her 20 years on the bench, but the case of Williams versus Sterling presented complexities that challenged every precedent she knew. A billionaire guardian, a disabled teen, a mother claiming duress, and now allegations of inappropriate relationships that could destroy reputations and lives. "Your Honor," Attorney Morrison began, his voice filled with righteous indignation. This case represents a clear abuse of power by a wealthy man who used his resources to purchase a vulnerable child and subsequently engaged in inappropriate conduct. Marcus's lawyer, Patricia Kellerman, the best family law attorney money could buy, stood with quiet authority. Your Honor, the evidence will show that Mr. Sterling rescued Ms. Williams from systematic neglect and possible intentional medical abuse, providing her with life-saving care and unprecedented opportunities for growth and independence. The media circus outside had turned their private struggle into public entertainment. Headlines screamed about billionaire predators and modern-day slavery, while others championed rescue romance and love against all odds. Keisha sat in her wheelchair in the gallery, watching lawyers argue about her life like she was property to be distributed rather than a person with agency and choice. The past year of growing strength and confidence felt fragile under the weight of public scrutiny. When Denise took the stand, she painted herself as a grieving mother who'd been coerced into giving up her daughter during a moment of desperation. "I was overwhelmed, Your Honor," she testified, dabbing at her eyes with tissues. "I just lost my job. We were facing eviction, and this powerful man appeared like he was offering help. I thought it was temporary, just until I could get back on my feet." Ms. Williams, Kellerman began during cross-examination. "Did you or did you not receive $50,000 in exchange for signing custody papers?" "I was under duress." "Yes or no, Ms. Williams? Did you receive $50,000? "Yes, but..." "And did you spend that money on rehabilitation or housing or anything that would improve your situation to regain custody of your daughter?" The pause that followed spoke volumes. "I needed time to heal." Ms. Williams, bank records show expenditures for gambling, alcohol, and luxury items. "Would you like me to read them aloud?" "How do you prove that love is pure when the world is determined to see corruption? When have you had to defend a relationship that others misunderstood?" When Marcus took the stand, he faced questions designed to paint him as either a saint or a predator, with no room for the complex truth that lay between. "Mr. Sterling," Morrison pressed, "isn't it true that you developed romantic feelings for your ward?" "I developed protective feelings that evolved over time as she grew from a traumatized child into a remarkable young woman. Evolved into sexual attraction, evolved into respect, admiration, and yes, eventually love. Love for a child in your care. Love for a young woman who taught me that strength comes in many forms." The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Marcus's honesty was either his salvation or his destruction, depending on how the judge interpreted his words. When Keisha finally took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. This was the moment everyone had been waiting for, the voice of the person at the center of the controversy. "Ms. Williams," Judge Hendricks said gently, "I want you to know that you're safe to speak honestly here. No one can hurt you for telling the truth." Keisha looked out at the packed courtroom, cameras capturing every expression, reporters ready to twist every word. But when her eyes found Marcus's face in the crowd, she found her courage. "Your Honor, I want to tell you about dignity," she began, her voice clear and strong. "For 16 years, I was told I should be grateful for the bare minimum. Grateful for a roof over my head, even when there wasn't enough food. Grateful for medical care, even when it was denied. Grateful to be kept alive, even when I wasn't allowed to live." She paused, gathering her thoughts like a lawyer preparing her closing argument. "Marcus Sterling didn't save me with money. He saved me by seeing value where others saw burden. He saved me by believing I could be more than my limitations. He saved me by treating my recovery like it mattered, my future like it was worth investing in." The judge's decision seemed clear until the final witness took the stand, Dr. Chun, with medical evidence that would either vindicate Marcus completely or destroy him forever. The envelope in her hands contained test results from Keisha's first day in his care that no one had seen before. Some secrets are buried so deep that only science can dig them up, and some truths are powerful enough to rewrite history. The courtroom fell cathedral quiet as Dr. Chun displayed medical charts on the overhead projector. Each graph line told the story of resurrection, Muscles strengthened, bone density improved, neurological function enhanced, a body rewriting its own limits. Your Honor, Dr. Chen began, her voice carrying the authority of medical expertise and moral certainty. I've been practicing rehabilitation medicine for 15 years. I have never seen improvement of this magnitude in such a short time frame. She clicked to the next slide, showing Keisha's nutritional panels from her first day in Marcus's care compared to historical records spanning her entire childhood. These levels indicate systematic malnutrition severe enough to qualify as medical abuse. But more concerning is the pattern of intentional maintenance of deficiency. Judge Hendricks leaned forward. Explain what you mean by intentional maintenance, doctor. Ms. Williams' medical records show repeated instances where improvement began during periods of adequate nutrition. Summer camps, extended hospital stays, visits with relatives. Each time, upon returning home, her condition deteriorated rapidly. This pattern suggests deliberate restriction of nutrition designed to maintain dependency. The implications hit the courtroom like a physical wave. This wasn't neglect born of poverty or ignorance. This was calculated abuse disguised as caregiving. Attorney Morrison stood quickly. Objection, Your Honor. Dr. Chen is speculating about intent without evidence. I have evidence, Dr. Chen replied calmly, producing a thick file. Pharmacy records showing prescriptions for nutritional supplements filled but never administered. School lunch programs documenting that Keisha's meals were being sold by her mother for cash. Emergency room visits where malnutrition was noted, but Child Protective Services was told the child was simply a picky eater. When medical truth contradicts family lies, which do you trust? How do you handle discovering that neglect was disguised as care? Share your thoughts. Denise Williams began to crumble in her seat as the evidence mounted. The carefully constructed narrative of desperate poverty giving way to a more sinister truth. A mother who'd systematically weakened her own child for financial gain. Dr. Chun, Kellerman continued, in your professional opinion, what would have happened to Ms. Williams if she'd remained in her mother's care? Based on the trajectory we documented, Ms. Williams would likely have experienced continued deterioration, possibly leading to life-threatening complications within 2 to 3 years. In her current prognosis under appropriate care, Dr. Chun smiled for the first time during her testimony. With continued proper nutrition and rehabilitation, I expect Ms. Williams to achieve near normal mobility and complete independence. She has the potential to attend college, pursue a career, live a full and productive life. The difference between those two futures, slow death versus unlimited potential, hung in the air like a choice between darkness and light. Dr. Chun, Judge Hendricks asked, have you observed anything in Mr. Sterling's care of Ms. Williams that concerns you professionally? Quite the opposite, Your Honor. Mr. Sterling has demonstrated exceptional commitment to Ms. Williams' well-being. He attends every appointment, advocates fiercely for her needs, and has provided resources for treatment that most patients could never access. From a medical standpoint, his guardianship has been exemplary. Morrison made one last desperate attempt. Dr. Chun, are you aware that Mr. Sterling has admitted to romantic feelings for his ward? Dr. Chen's response was measured but firm. Mr. Sterling's feelings developed as Ms. Williams grew from a severely compromised child into a healthy, vibrant young woman. That evolution speaks to the success of her recovery, not any impropriety on his part. Love that grows from respect and admiration is not predatory, it's natural. As the medical testimony concluded, Denise Williams finally broke. The weight of evidence, the public exposure of her abuse, the loss of any moral high ground crushed the last of her defiance. I didn't mean for it to go so far, she whispered, tears streaming down her face. I was just so tired of being needed all the time. The money helped, but I never meant to hurt her. I love my daughter. Love doesn't systematically poison the person it claims to protect, Judge Hendricks replied quietly. As the judge prepared to rule in Marcus's favor, Keisha stood up in the courtroom gallery with words that stopped everyone cold. Your Honor, there's something else you need to know. Something that changes everything about why I can never go back. Her next revelation would shatter the last illusions about family loyalty. "Your Honor," Keisha continued, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was about to reveal, "my mother didn't just neglect me for money. She told me that my father never wanted me, that he left because I was born disabled. She told me I was the reason he abandoned us, that my condition destroyed our family." She paused, gathering strength for the final blow. "2 weeks ago, I hired a private investigator with money I earned from selling my story rights. I found my father. He's been looking for me for 17 years. My mother told him I died at birth. Sometimes the greatest lies are told by the people who claim to love us most, and the truth can resurrect the dead." The courtroom erupted like a volcano after Keisha's revelation. Reporters scrambled for phones. Lawyers whispered frantically to clients. And Judge Hendricks called for order with the authority of someone who'd seen every kind of family drama, but never one this twisted. "Ms. Williams," the judge said carefully, "are you saying your mother told your father you were deceased?" "Yes, Your Honor. She told him I died from complications during birth. He's been grieving a daughter he thought was dead, while I've been grieving a father I thought abandoned me." The silence that followed was the kind that comes before earthquakes, heavy with the weight of a world about to shift on its axis. Denise Williams sat in the witness chair like a statue of shame, her carefully constructed lies crumbling faster than sand castles at high tide. Her mouth opened and closed soundlessly, searching for explanations that didn't exist, defenses that couldn't be mounted. "Where is your father now?" Judge Hendricks asked. "Outside, Your Honor. I asked him to come today because I thought you should hear the truth from him directly." Marcus felt his chest tighten with something between admiration and terror. This young woman he'd fallen in love with possessed a courage that humbled him. While he'd been planning legal strategies and defensive maneuvers, she'd been conducting her own investigation, uncovering truths that would change everything. The courtroom doors opened, and a man entered who looked like Keisha would in 30 years. Same determined eyes, same stubborn set to his jaw, same quiet strength that radiated from his core. David Williams walked down the aisle with the careful steps of someone approaching a miracle he was afraid might disappear. When his eyes found Keisha in the gallery, 17 years of grief transformed into wonder in the space between heartbeats. Tears streamed down his face as he mouthed the word "baby" like a prayer finally answered. "State your name for the record," the clerk instructed. "David Michael Williams. I'm Keisha's father." The words hung in the air like sunlight breaking through storm clouds. In the witness chair, Denise began to shake with the tremors of someone watching their entire web of lies unravel in public. Have you ever discovered that someone you trusted had stolen years of your life with lies? When did you realize that the person claiming to protect you was actually your prison warden? "Mr. Williams," Judge Hendricks said gently, "please tell the court what you know about your daughter's situation." David's voice was steady despite the tears that continued to flow. "Your Honor, I was 19 when Keisha was born. Her mother and I weren't married, but I was committed to being a father to our child. When Denise went into labor, there were complications." He paused, his eyes finding Keisha's face across the courtroom. "Denise told me the baby died during delivery. She showed me what she said was a death certificate. I held her while we both cried for our lost daughter. I paid for what I thought was a funeral, helped her through what I believed was grief." The courtroom was so quiet you could hear hearts breaking in stereo. "For 17 years, I visited what I thought was my daughter's grave every February 14th, her birthday. I've left flowers, talked to her, told her about my life, my marriage, the other children she would have been a big sister to." Denise finally found her voice, raw with desperation. "David, you have to understand." "Understand what?" His voice carried the weight of nearly 2 decades of manufactured grief. "Understand that you let me mourn a child who was alive? Understand that you let my wife comfort me through years of guilt about not being able to save a daughter who didn't need saving? Understand that you stole my child and then stole my grief?" Marcus watched this reunion unfold with emotions he couldn't untangle. Relief that Keisha had found her father. Terror that she might not need him anymore. Pride in her strength and determination. Guilt that part of him wished David Williams had stayed lost. Mr. Williams, Attorney Morrison said, grasping for any advantage, if you've wanted to be a father for 17 years, doesn't Ms. Keisha belong with you now rather than with Mr. Sterling? The question everyone had been afraid to ask hung in the courtroom like smoke from a fired gun. David looked at his daughter with eyes that held years of lost love and newfound hope. That's not my decision to make, he said quietly. I lost the right to make decisions for Keisha when I believed she was dead instead of fighting to find the truth. She spent 17 years building a life without me. If she wants me in that life now, I'll be grateful for whatever place she gives me. But I won't use guilt or biology to claim a relationship I haven't earned. The wisdom in his words silenced even Morrison's objections. Here was a man who understood the difference between demanding love and deserving it. Judge Hendricks had heard enough. I'm calling a recess. Ms. Williams, I want you to have time to speak privately with your father. Mr. Sterling, my chamber's in 1 hour. We need to discuss the future of this arrangement. As David Williams met his daughter for the first time since her birth, Marcus realized that saving Keisha might mean losing her, and that true love sometimes means accepting when you're not the hero of someone else's story. When love means letting go, how do you choose between the man who saved you and the man who never stopped looking? The courthouse conference room felt smaller than a closet despite its generous size. Father and daughter sat across from each other at a polished table, 17 years of stolen time stretching between them like an ocean neither knew how to cross. David Williams studied Keisha's face with the intensity of someone memorizing something precious they might lose again. She was beautiful in ways he'd never imagined during those years of grieving an infant he thought had died. Strong, intelligent, alive with possibility. You look like your grandmother, he said softly. My mother. She would have spoiled you rotten. Keisha felt tears burning behind her eyes. A grandmother she'd never known. A father she'd been told had abandoned her, a whole side of her family that had been cut away like a cancer that was never malignant. Tell me about them, she said. Tell me about the family I lost. David's face lit up with the joy of someone finally allowed to share treasured memories. Your grandmother, Rose, was a teacher. She would have helped you with homework every night and baked cookies every Sunday. Your Uncle James is a physical therapist. He would have worked with you, helped you get stronger sooner. Each relative he described was another door Denise had locked, another relationship she'd stolen, another piece of Keisha's identity that had been amputated for the sake of maintaining control. I have 2 half-brothers, David continued. Michael is 14, David Jr. is 11. They know about you now. They've been asking when they can meet their big sister. The word sister hit Keisha like a physical blow. She'd never had siblings, never been anyone's big sister, never had the chance to be protective and nurturing and important to someone smaller than herself. What about your wife? Keisha asked carefully. What does she feel about this? David's expression grew tender. Susan's been hoping for this day since I first told her about you. She's always said you weren't really gone, that she could feel you somewhere in the world. She wants to meet you when you're ready. A stepmother who'd hoped for her existence rather than resenting it. Brothers who were excited to claim her rather than ashamed of her condition. A whole family structure built on love rather than obligation, hope rather than burden. I don't know how to be a daughter, Keisha whispered. I barely know how to be me. David reached across the table, his hand covering hers with 17 years of love he'd been saving up. You don't have to know how. We'll figure out together. The door opened, and Marcus entered with the careful movements of someone walking onto a battlefield where he wasn't sure which side he was supposed to fight for. How do you compete with biology when love isn't enough? Have you ever had to choose between 2 people who both genuinely cared for you? Share that impossible decision. I don't want to interrupt, Marcus said, but his eyes betrayed the fear that he was losing the most important person in his world. You're not interrupting, Keisha said quickly. Sit down. We need to talk about this together. The 3 of them sat in triangular tension. David with the biological claim, Marcus with the rescue history, and Keisha with the impossible choice between them. I want to be clear about something, David said, looking directly at Marcus. What you did for my daughter, I can never repay that. You saved her life when I didn't even know she needed saving." Marcus nodded stiffly, unsure if he was being thanked or dismissed. "But," David continued, "she's my daughter. I've been looking for her for 17 years. I deserve the chance to be her father now." "With respect," Marcus replied, his voice carefully controlled. "Being someone's father isn't about biology or time lost. It's about showing up, making sacrifices, putting their needs before your own. I've been doing that for over a year. After taking her away from her mother for money, after rescuing her from systematic abuse that you failed to prevent because you believed a lie instead of fighting for the truth." The accusation hit like a physical blow. David's face flushed with anger and guilt in equal measure. "I was 19 years old. She showed me a death certificate, a fake death certificate that any real investigation would have exposed. You grieved for 17 years instead of questioning, mourning instead of searching." "Stop it," Keisha said quietly, but her voice carried enough authority to silence both men. "Both of you just stop." She looked between the two most important men in her life, one who'd given her DNA, the other who'd given her hope. "David," she said, and the use of his first name rather than father made both men flinch. "You say you've been looking for me for 17 years, but you've been looking for a dead baby, not a living daughter. You've been mourning the child you thought you lost instead of fighting for the one who actually needed you." David's face crumpled, but she wasn't finished. "And Marcus," she continued, turning to face the man who'd changed her world, "you saved me, and I'll be grateful for that until the day I die. But you can't use that rescue to own me. I'm not your second chance at saving your sister. I'm not your redemption project. I'm just me." The silence that followed was heavy with uncomfortable truths and competing loves. "I don't want to choose between you," Keisha said finally, "but I won't be fought over like a prize either. I'm 18 in 6 months. I can make my own decisions about where I live and who I consider family." She looked at both men with eyes that held strength neither had expected from the broken girl they'd first encountered. "I want both of you in my life. David, you're my father, and I want to know my brothers and meet Susan and learn about the family I never knew existed. But Marcus, you're the man who taught me I was worth saving, worth loving, worth fighting for." The triangle of tension began to shift, the competition giving way to something more complicated but potentially more healing. "Can we try something different?" Keisha asked. "Can we try being a family that doesn't fit any traditional definition but works for all of us?" As the three of them sat in the conference room, working out custody arrangements that would satisfy both fathers and give Keisha the space to grow, none of them knew that Denise Williams was making one final desperate move that would threaten everything they built together. Desperation makes people dangerous, but a mother losing her meal ticket becomes absolutely deadly. The news van pulled up to David Williams' modest suburban home at 6 a.m., followed by 3 more media vehicles filled with reporters hungry for the next chapter in a story that had captured national attention. Denise Williams sat in the lead van's passenger seat, her face set with the determined expression of someone playing their final card. She'd spent the night crafting a narrative that would paint her as the victim rather than the villain. A young mother overwhelmed by a disabled child, manipulated by powerful men, denied her parental rights by a corrupt system that favored wealth over biological bonds. "Remember," the reporter beside her said, checking his recording equipment, "we need emotion, vulnerability, maternal anguish. The public loves an underdog story." Denise nodded, practicing the tears she'd perfected over years of manipulating social workers, teachers, and medical professionals. She knew exactly how to position her body language, where to pause for maximum impact, which words would trigger sympathy instead of skepticism. Meanwhile, in Marcus's penthouse, Keisha woke to her phone buzzing with text messages from numbers she didn't recognize. The first one made her blood run cold. "Your mother is outside your father's house with news cameras. She's claiming you were kidnapped and brainwashed. This is going to be bad." Marcus appeared at her doorway, his own phone pressed to his ear, his face grim with the expression he wore when billion-dollar deals were falling apart. "Turn on Channel 7, he said, ending his call. The morning news showed Denise Williams standing on David's front lawn, tears streaming down her face as she clutched a manila folder filled with what she claimed was evidence of Marcus Sterling's systematic grooming and manipulation of her daughter. "My baby was stolen from me," Denise sobbed into the microphone, her voice breaking at precisely the right moments. This man used his money and power to take advantage of a desperate situation. He convinced a scared, overwhelmed mother to sign away her rights, then isolated my daughter from everyone who truly loved her. The reporter nodded sympathetically. "Ms. Williams, what evidence do you have that Mr. Sterling's intentions were inappropriate?" Denise opened her folder, revealing what looked like photographs, documents, and witness statements. "I have pictures of them together in romantic situations. I have testimony from household staff about their inappropriate relationship. I have medical records showing how he controlled every aspect of her care to make her dependent on him." Each accusation was a carefully crafted half-truth designed to transform a rescue story into a predator narrative. The photos were innocent moments taken out of context. The witness statements were from disgruntled former employees who'd been dismissed for stealing. The medical records were accurate but stripped of the context that showed systematic improvement rather than manipulation. When was the last time someone tried to rewrite your story to make themselves the hero? How do you fight back when lies are more compelling than truth? Inside David's house, the Williams family huddled around their television screen, watching Denise's performance with expressions ranging from disgust to terror. David's wife, Susan, held their two sons close, trying to shield them from the media circus that had invaded their quiet neighborhood. "She's going to destroy Keisha," Susan whispered, her voice tight with protective fury. "She's going to paint that poor girl as either a victim who can't think for herself or a predator who seduced her guardian." David's phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting statements, lawyers offering services, strangers sharing opinions about a situation they knew nothing about. But the call that made his face go white came from his workplace. "David, I'm sorry," his supervisor said, his voice uncomfortable with the conversation he didn't want to have. "The company feels it's best if you take some time off until this media attention dies down. We can't have our employees at the center of this kind of controversy." Suspended from work for the crime of being a father who'd been lied to for 17 years. Punished for trying to reunite with a daughter he'd never stopped loving. The injustice of it made David's hands shake with rage. At the penthouse, Marcus paced like a caged predator while his team of lawyers and public relations specialists worked frantically to counter Denise's narrative. But they were fighting an uphill battle against a story designed to trigger every protective instinct and moral outrage in the viewing public. "We need to get ahead of this," Patricia Kellerman said, her voice sharp with professional urgency. "Every hour we stay silent allows her version to take root. By tonight, half the country will believe you're a predator, and Keisha is either your victim or your accomplice. I won't put Keisha through a public defense of our relationship," Marcus said firmly. "She's been through enough." "Then you'll lose everything," Kellerman replied bluntly. "Your reputation, your businesses, possibly your freedom, if she can make any of these charges stick legally. And Keisha will lose the life you've built for her." The choice was impossible. Protect Keisha from additional trauma or protect their future together. Either option required sacrificing something precious, someone important. Keisha made the decision for him. "Set up the press conference," she said from the doorway, her voice carrying the steel that had gotten her through 17 years of systematic abuse. "It's time people heard the truth from me." Marcus turned to face her, seeing not the broken girl he'd rescued, but the fierce woman she'd become. "Keisha, you don't understand what they'll do to you. The questions they'll ask, the way they'll twist your words. I understand that my mother's trying to destroy the man who saved my life and the life we've built together," she said quietly. "I understand that sometimes love means fighting for what matters instead of hiding from what's hard." She moved to stand beside him, her hand finding his with the certainty of someone who'd made their choice and would live with the consequences. "Besides," she added with a smile that held both innocence and steel, "I have something they don't expect." "What's that?" "The truth. And 17 years of practice surviving people who underestimate me." As Keisha prepared to face the media storm that would either validate their love or destroy their lives, Marcus realized that the girl he'd saved had grown into a woman strong enough to save him back. When lies travel faster than light, the truth needs to run at the speed of love to catch up. The press conference room at the downtown Marriott buzzed with the energy of reporters who sensed blood in the water. They'd come expecting to corner a victim or expose a predator. Instead, they found themselves facing a young woman who commanded the room with quiet authority and steel-wrapped grace. Keisha sat at the center table flanked by Marcus and David, an unusual family configuration that visually told the story better than words could. Behind them, Maria sat with David's wife Susan and their two boys, a support system that spanned biological and chosen family bonds. The questions came fast and sharp, designed to trap rather than illuminate. Ms. Williams, were you coerced into this relationship? Ms. Williams, do you consider yourself a victim? Ms. Williams, how do you respond to allegations that Mr. Sterling groomed you? Keisha let them fire their accusations into the air like arrows shot at clouds. When the room finally quieted, she began to speak with the measured cadence of someone who'd learned that truth-telling was both an art and a weapon. My name is Keisha Marie Williams. I am 17 years old. For 16 years, I was systematically starved, medically neglected, and emotionally abused by my biological mother, who received government benefits based on the severity of my disability. The directness of her statement caught the room off guard. No hedging, no diplomatic language, just facts delivered with surgical precision. My mother didn't feed me properly because healthy children lose disability benefits. She didn't provide adequate medical care because improvement threatens income. She called me deadweight in public because that's how she saw me, as a burden that paid bills rather than a daughter who deserved love. A reporter near the front raised her hand. But Ms. Williams, don't you think it's unusual for a wealthy older man to take such personal interest in a teenage girl? Keisha's eyes found the woman with laser focus. What I think is unusual is that it took 17 years for someone to notice I was dying slowly and decide that was unacceptable. She paused, letting that sink in. Marcus Sterling didn't save me because he's a saint. He saved me because he recognized something in my situation that reminded him of his own loss. But the reason he saved me matters less than the fact that he did it when no one else would. Have you ever had to defend a relationship that others couldn't understand? When did you realize that other people's opinions mattered less than your own happiness? The room grew quieter as Keisha continued, her voice gaining strength with each revelation. You want to know about grooming? Let me tell you about real grooming. It's being told from birth that you're lucky anyone loves you. It's being taught that gratitude is more important than dignity. It's being convinced that survival is the same thing as living. She turned to look directly at Marcus, her expression softening. This man didn't groom me to be dependent on him. He taught me I was strong enough to be independent. He didn't isolate me from people who loved me. He helped me find a father I thought was dead and the family I never knew existed. He didn't control my medical care to keep me weak. He provided resources that made me stronger than I ever dreamed possible. A reporter from the back shouted, "But what about the romantic relationship? When did that begin?" Keisha's smile was patient but firm. Love isn't something you schedule or plan. It grows from respect, admiration, and shared experience. My feelings for Marcus developed as I grew from a traumatized child into a confident young woman. His feelings evolved as he watched me become someone he could see as an equal rather than just someone who needed protection. Are you saying the relationship is appropriate? I'm saying the relationship is real. And I'm saying that in 6 months, when I turn 18, my choices will be legally my own. But emotionally, they've been mine for a while now. David Williams leaned forward to the microphone, his voice carrying the authority of biological connection and moral clarity. I'm Keisha's father, he said simply. I spent 17 years believing she was dead because her mother lied to me. When I found out she was alive, my first instinct was to claim my parental rights and bring her home with me. The room held its breath. But watching her today, listening to her speak, seeing the woman she's become, I realized that my job as her father isn't to own her, or control her. It's to support her choices and be grateful that someone loved her enough to keep her alive until I could find her again. He turned to look at Marcus with an expression that held both gratitude and challenge. Marcus Sterling gave my daughter something I couldn't, not because I didn't love her, but because I didn't know she needed saving. Now my job is to give her something he can't, the unconditional love of biological family. Together, we can give her everything she deserves. The questions continued for another hour, but the narrative had shifted. What had begun as a story about predator and victim had become something more complex, a tale of found family, chosen love, and the courage to build relationships that didn't fit traditional molds. As they left the hotel, Keisha walked between both men with her head high and her future stretched out before her like an open road. But the real test would come in the court of public opinion, where truth and lies would battle for dominance in the 24-hour news cycle. The first reviews were already posting on social media, some calling her brave, others calling her brainwashed, most simply calling her story unbelievable. The truth had been told. Now, they had to wait to see if anyone was ready to hear it. As the press conference ended with Keisha walking confidently between both men, the first social media reactions were already flooding in, some calling her brave, others calling her brainwashed. But the real judgment would come from an unexpected source. The two half-brothers she'd never met, whose reaction would either welcome her into the family or destroy it forever. Sometimes the strongest families are built not from blood, but from people who choose to love each other despite impossible circumstances. The suburban living room looked like a war zone of legal documents, medical files, and family photos spread across coffee tables and couch cushions. 3 months after the press conference, the media attention had shifted to newer scandals, but the William Sterling family was still figuring out how to exist in the strange new world they'd created together. Michael and David Jr. sat on either side of Keisha on the couch, their initial shyness having evolved into protective brotherhood that would have made any big sister proud. At 14, Michael had his father's serious eyes and his stepmother's nurturing instincts. 11-year-old David Jr. possessed an endless curiosity about everything from Keisha's wheelchair to Marcus's business empire. "So you really live in a penthouse?" David Jr. asked for the 10th time since they'd arrived for Sunday dinner. "Like in movies?" "I really do," Keisha laughed, ruffling his hair in a gesture that felt both foreign and natural. "And yes, you can visit whenever you want." Susan Williams moved between kitchen and living room with the easy grace of someone who'd spent years creating spaces where blended families could flourish. She'd welcome Keisha with open arms and genuine warmth, treating her not as an intruder, but as the missing piece their family had been waiting for. "The custody arrangement is finalized," David announced, settling into his favorite chair with a folder of legal papers. "Shared guardianship between Marcus and myself until Keisha turns 18, then she becomes a legal adult free to make her own choices." Marcus sat slightly apart from the family cluster, still feeling like a guest in this house despite months of Sunday dinners and holiday celebrations. The relationship between him and David had evolved from suspicious competition to grudging respect to something approaching genuine friendship, built on shared love for a remarkable young woman and mutual recognition that they were both better fathers together than either could be alone. "What about college?" Susan asked, settling beside her husband. "Have you thought about what you want to study?" Keisha's eyes lit up with the kind of excitement that still amazed everyone who remembered the broken girl from the subway station. "Pre-med with a focus on rehabilitation medicine. I want to help other kids like me, the ones who've been told their conditions are permanent when they might just be consequences of neglect or mistreatment." The dream was ambitious but not impossible. Her grades had improved dramatically with proper nutrition and dedicated tutoring. Her SAT scores suggested she'd have her pick of colleges. Her personal story would make any admissions essay unforgettable. How do you rebuild a family from scratch when everyone has different definitions of love? When have you had to create your own version of belonging? Share your experience. Marcus pulled out his own folder, this one containing financial documents and foundation paperwork. The Keisha Williams Foundation for Disability Advocacy is officially approved. We start operations next month with a focus on identifying and preventing medical neglect in disabled children. The foundation would be Keisha's legacy, a way to transform her suffering into salvation for others facing similar circumstances. Marcus had pledged $10 million in startup funding, but more importantly, he'd pledged his time and expertise to building something that would outlast them all. "You don't have to name it after me," Keisha protested, as she had every time they discussed the foundation. "Yes, I do," Marcus replied firmly. "Your story deserves to be told. Other kids deserve to know that survival is possible, that improvement is achievable, that love exists even in the darkest places." David Jr. looked up from the tablet where he'd been researching foundation work. "Can I help too? When I'm older?" "You can help now," Keisha said, pulling him closer. "We need people to help us identify kids who might need intervention. Teachers, coaches, neighbors, people who care enough to notice when something's wrong." The conversation was interrupted by the doorbell, followed by Susan's surprised voice calling from the front hall. "Keisha, there's someone here to see you." They all turned as Susan returned with a young woman about Keisha's age, her eyes wide with the kind of nervous hope that comes with desperate courage. "My name is Ashley Martinez," the girl said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I saw your story on the news. I think my situation might be like yours was." The room fell silent as everyone processed the implications. Ashley was thin in the wrong ways, her clothes hanging loose, her movements careful like someone who'd learned to conserve energy. But her eyes held the same spark Keisha remembered seeing in mirrors, the fierce determination to survive that refuses to be extinguished. Keisha rolled her wheelchair forward, extending her hand with the same gentle authority Marcus had shown on that frozen street corner over a year ago. "Tell us what's happening," she said simply. As Ashley began to speak about medication being withheld, meals being restricted, doctor's appointments being canceled, Keisha felt the circle complete itself. She was no longer just the rescued. She was becoming the rescuer. Marcus watched from his chair, pride and love swelling in his chest, as he witnessed Keisha transform from survivor to advocate. David and Susan exchanged glances that spoke of shared recognition. Their daughter had found her calling. "We're going to help you," Keisha said when Ashley finished her story. "All of us. That's what families do. They protect each other." The word family encompassed everyone in the room. Biological father, chosen guardian, stepmother, half-brothers, and now a girl who needed the same salvation Keisha had received. It was messy and complicated and didn't fit any traditional definition. It was also perfect. As the evening wound down and plans were made to help Ashley, Marcus pulled Keisha aside for a private moment in David's backyard. "Are you happy?" he asked, the question carrying the weight of every choice they'd made together. Keisha looked back through the kitchen window at the family gathered around Ashley, offering food and comfort and hope in equal measure. David was already on the phone with his lawyer. Susan was preparing a guest room. The boys were showing Ashley their video games with the easy acceptance of children who instinctively recognize someone who needs kindness. "I'm more than happy," she said, her hand finding his. "I'm home. All of us are home." The kiss they shared was soft with certainty rather than desperate with need. They'd found their way through impossible circumstances to something sustainable, love that had been tested by public scrutiny and family complexity and emerged stronger for the experience. Behind them, the house filled with voices planning another rescue, another chance at salvation, another family choosing to build itself from love rather than obligation. The weight of mercy, it turned out, was lighter when shared among many hands. The graduation ceremony at Harvard Medical School buzzed with the excited energy of futures beginning. In the audience, an unusual cheering section held signs that read Dr. Keisha Williams, with pride that transcended traditional family boundaries. Marcus Sterling, now 47 and bearing the silver hair that came with the stress of running both a business empire and a foundation that had saved over 200 children, applauded with tears streaming down his face. Beside him, David Williams held Susan's hand while their now teenage sons whistled loud enough to embarrass their big sister. In the front row, Ashley Martinez, now a sophomore at NYU studying social work, led the standing ovation with the fierce loyalty of someone whose life had been transformed by the person walking across that stage. When Keisha's name was called, she walked without assistance to accept her degree, her movement steady and strong. The cerebral palsy would always be part of her story, but had become a footnote rather than the main narrative. After the ceremony, as the extended family celebrated at a restaurant overlooking Boston Harbor, Marcus stood to make a toast. 5 years ago, I thought I was rescuing someone. He began, his voice thick with emotion. What I discovered was that she was rescuing me. Keisha taught me that families aren't born, they're built. Love isn't inherited, it's chosen. Strength isn't the absence of struggle. It's the decision to keep fighting despite the struggle. He raised his glass toward the woman who transformed from victim to victor to advocate to doctor. To Dr. Keisha Williams, who proves every day that the weight of mercy is always worth carrying. The toast echoed across the restaurant, carried by voices of the found family that had chosen each other through impossible circumstances and built something beautiful from the broken pieces of their separate pasts. Outside the restaurant windows, Boston Harbor reflected the lights of a city full of people who needed saving, children who deserved better, families waiting to be built from love rather than circumstance. The work continued. The family endured. The story became legend. But most importantly, the girl who'd once been called deadweight had become a woman whose life proved that everyone, absolutely everyone, is worth saving. The end.